Welcome back to More Than a Mill Spouse, the podcast for military spouses who want to create a life they love without losing themselves or burning themselves out in the process, which is something today's guest loves to talk about. Today, I'm joined by Vimbo Watson, who was named the Armed Forces Insurance 2025 Washington Navy Yard Spouse of the Year, which is not a mouthful at all. I've gotten to know Vimbo a little bit over the last couple of months, and she is a joy to be around. She loves speaking with groups about how to better attack stress and burnout head on. So, first off, Vimbo, welcome to the show. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me, Christine. And I'm so glad we were able to be connected. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So, one of my favorite questions to ask guests is, what did you know about the military lifestyle before marrying your service member?
Oh boy. This is a little embarrassing, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there because I feel like I'm not the only one. Years ago, my older sister was really into the show Army Lives. And so all I know, which is like, my husband's Navy. So that's a whole thing, the Army Navy rivalry. But all I knew is I had watched like a handful of episodes of Army Lives. I knew like very, very little other than what the average person knows when you watch the news and you see like it's the month of the military child. And sometimes schools do certain things for like I've worked in schools. And so we do things to honor veterans on Veterans Day and different holidays, but very limited. Yeah, it was definitely a learning curve once I joined the community as a military spouse.
So, talk a little bit about the learning curve, how you met your service member, and how you got introduced to this lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. So interestingly enough, my now husband, David, he and I were friends before he joined the Navy. He has a friend who has been in the Navy longer than him, who kind of encouraged him to do it, told him all of the benefits. And so we were friends. And then he joined the Navy. And then years later, we started dating. So there was kind of a timeline of we were friends for years. Then, he joins the Navy, then we start dating. So I've known him both before and after military service. He jumped right in and embraced it. And once we started dating, it was very front of mind for us because at the time we were living in different places. If he's in submarines, I didn't realize like if you're in the military, you have to live where submarines are. I was in a place that had a Navy base. So I thought, oh, this is great. He'll like move back over here and then we'll just continue. But it was a different kind of Navy base, not one that had submarines. So it was kind of a huge learning curve, even just throughout the dating process. And then, of course, once we got married and I ended up moving, I left my job, my community, moved across the country to the West Coast to join him because he was mid contract. He was already there and going out on subs every few months. That was definitely very difficult. I mean, when I say crash course, I mean like we were on a honeymoon in the Caribbean and 2 weeks later, he is going on a submarine, like 2 weeks later. So we're on our honeymoon, saying goodbye to all my friends. And then a couple weeks later, I moved across this country. I don't know a soul there. And he's getting on a submarine. And I'm looking around at like my fellow military spouses who are now going to be like my family while my husband's on this boat for a few months. It was definitely difficult, but I will say this, the community and the friends I made, and it's so cheesy to say like, we were literally in the same boat, but kind of, our spouses, our significant others were all in the same boat. There was a bond in that first period of our marriage, which was so difficult, very hard for your first year of marriage to spend half of it without your significant other on land. But because so many other people in my community were there and present and going through the exact same thing and anticipating when our loved ones would come back all together, it bonded us close. And I will say there are definitely a couple of friends I have from, years ago now from that experience who I still would call close friends, and some who even live now where we're stationed now. So we get together for dinner when we can, but it's just that shared experience, kind of like battle buddies. They say for people who are actually in the military, we're mil spouse buddies or even significant others and girlfriends, just we're all going through the same experience.
It makes such a difference when you have somebody that you can turn to and have those people who are going through it with you and understand
Exactly.
what it feels like. Because, when you have people in the community, whether it's through work or church or whatever, like they can empathize with the fact that your spouse is gone, but they don't know what it's like to be going through it. And so when you have others that you're walking through that with, it makes such a big difference. And those are the people that you really connect with and stay connected with over time. Now, you already had been building your career. What did that look like as you transitioned to being a military spouse?
Well, so that was actually kind of a tricky thing to navigate, but I will say I'm just fortunate to have a very supportive partner. I don't think I'm the only one. When I look around, I think a lot of service members realize that their spouses may be making sacrifices, quite often are making sacrifices if they have a career or if they even just have career aspirations, right? So I had been a classroom teacher for some years. I ended up becoming an elementary school principal. I worked very hard for my master's degree in K-12 administration. So in my mind, logically, I had a very clear path of like teacher, principal, eventually someday hoping to work at a district level and be a superintendent. And so when we got married, I was in my fifth year of being an elementary school principal and moving to the West Coast. I found that, and I can't say that this is it exactly, but I know I was looking for school-based positions in admin, even if it wasn't to be, like a school principal, because sometimes there's a path of they want to see you work as like an assistant principal first if you're going to a different system. And because this was cross country, that was the case for me. And I feel like in the early stages of conversations, whether it was the first round of interviews or even just emails with prospective employers, it became very clear to not lead with the fact that I was a military spouse, for better or worse, right? Because I know our community now, especially even more, we're great, we're resilient. A lot of us come in with all these extra skills because we have to be flexible. But what they saw, and I guess rightfully so, was you're going to be here for a short time. So why would we invest in onboarding you, especially at an admin role? I say this to my husband, David, all the time. I say, being a school teacher, yes, that is absolutely difficult to come into the role, but you get a new batch of kids every year. Being an admin, I found that when I'm in the role, it takes 2 or 3 years to really get your staff to trust you, to come to you, to problem solve collaboratively. I mean, it's a lot of relationship building that has to happen over years versus building a relationship within 180 days within a school year. We moved to Washington State, and I actually ended up leaving admin for a year and doing teaching kindergarten. And it was so fun. And it was, I think, great for the season of life we were in. We knew we were probably going to be moving, like we weren't staying in that area after his first contract was done. But it was definitely humbling. I mean, going from being the boss to now going back to being a classroom teacher, someone else is telling you when staff meetings are. And then even now in our latest duty station, it's been some navigating. And that's why for now and in this season we're in, I've decided entrepreneurship is just what fits for our family, what we need. Still getting to educate, still getting to speak, still getting to support education. But working in a school, it's a little tricky for my specific career pathway and for what I want to achieve. To answer your question in a long story short or short story long, it has definitely impacted my career for sure.
I mean, I think that's such a common story, not just for teachers, but for any career path where you're trying to advance to a leadership position. People are hesitant to give that leadership position to you if they don't feel like you're going to be there for the long run. So I think your story is so common in this lifestyle. So talk about as you transitioned and said, okay, it's not going to look the way that I thought it was. What was that transition like for you and how did it lead you to what you're doing now?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what I had to do a lot of, both when I was working as a kindergarten teacher and then when we moved back to the East Coast, so we kind of like, I have ping ponged a lot as an adult anyway. I had to sit down and think what it is that I really enjoy doing. What is the essence of that? Because I think sometimes in the past, I've gotten so stuck on a title, right? So like I am only fulfilled in my career if someone is calling me, Principal Watson, saying my name with that title before it. But when I really dug down, I thought, okay, what is it that I really enjoy doing? I really love admin work, organizing, all sorts of stuff. I love speaking. I have a passion for it. I feel alive when I get to do keynotes or interactive workshops. And what is it? What is the essence of the subject matter that I'm passionate about? And for me, that is community building and wellness. That is a lot of what I center, what I speak and teach on. And so when you really distill what you're passionate about and you really hone in on what your focus is, that can apply to a lot of settings. You don't just have to be a classroom teacher or a school principal. You can apply that broadly. So when we first moved here, where we currently are stationed, I worked for a year for a nonprofit. It was perfectly aligned with what I was passionate about and what I really enjoyed doing. And in that role, I got to speak and story tell and travel and connect with people. And so while it was not a role that I necessarily thought would be within my career pathway or my timeline, it really fit and helped me continue to grow as an individual. And I was actually the director of development. And so I learned fundraising skills in that role. That wasn't necessarily something I was seeking as an administrator, but it's still very valuable because schools still, I had experience budgeting and things like that. So I think what's helped me in this process is letting go of you have to have a specific title and just realizing it. What is it you really like to do? Do you like to write? Okay, you could be an editor in chief of a magazine, or you can blog, or you can create your own space in the world. That's what I've been so excited to do this year is really just connect and speak and create my own space in this world, continuing to teach and lead in my own way.
I mean, I think it's so important to really be able to step away from the title, the specific way that we thought the career was supposed to look, and to really get to the heart of what am I passionate about? What is my purpose? What are the things that really light me up? And how can I do that in a new way, in a way that might not have been the way that I initially envisioned it, but what's possible for me now with my skills, with the things that light me up. So, talk about how you started speaking about burnout specifically, because I know this is something that so many of us struggle with.
So I started speaking about burnout in my previous role when I was an elementary school principal. I was leading a school during the pandemic, and I actually started doing professional development kind of on a smaller scale for people who worked within my school district. And a lot of it was focused around the use of the new technology we were getting into and managing social media. And a lot of our students were virtual or at home. And so we were having to navigate that, and adjust our handbooks and all sorts of stuff. But throughout that experience and just coaching and mentoring staff that were within my building, I started to develop an understanding of, okay, this is how we get into a state of burnout. So what can we do before that state? How can we prevent that? Even as an administrator myself, I was noticing signs of burnout within myself that I was in the early to mid stages of burnout. I'm glad I didn't go all the way, but I started reading books about it. And so this was a few years ago now. And within the last couple of years, I mentioned about a year ago now, I was working for a nonprofit and I would travel and speak for the nonprofit, yes. But I also was finding opportunities to speak about things that, like you said, lit me up and I was passionate about. And as I talked to everyone I was surrounded by in different communities, I'm like, oh, burnout isn't just a educator's problem. Military spouses experience burnout, one PCS after another, one move after another, or having to develop new relationships. I think I've really, in the last couple of years, leaned into that. And honestly, even last year, it kind of started as I was hosting my own events quite a bit because I just said, okay, well, because I'm still building my network here, if no one wants to invite me to speak, I'm just going to get together the people I know in my network and say, hey, let's focus on what self-care actually looks like without paying a ton of money or, having to start any crazy new routine. How can we take care of ourselves and take care of our community? And so that's really how it started little by little. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, there's so many directions we could go, but I think it's good if we just kind of start with laying this foundation of what is burnout or what are the signs of burnout? What should we be aware of?
Okay, so burnout, I'm going to have to define a couple of things to connect them, and it'll make sense with the explanation, I promise. So, stress, we all experience stress every day. It is a fact of life. There is a wonderful TED talk that talks about how we view stress actually impacts how stress impacts us. Stress is a fact of life, kind of like eating your lunch every day. It's how you handle it, it's whether you make healthier choices around it that impact whether or not it'll sink you. So, burnout is what happens when you go too long without regularly completing what we call the stress cycle. So, you experience stress. That's just like an event of something that triggers an actual response in your body. Your body actually feels something, whether or not you're conscious of it, it has an impact on what's going on, what chemicals are being released. And so, stress happens daily. You respond in a certain way. You might try to speed. You shouldn't speed down the road. You should stick to the speed limit. But there are different things we do to navigate the stress we experience every day. That's just us experiencing stress and then reacting, experiencing stress and then reacting. But there's a third part of the stress cycle, which is completing the stress cycle. And that comes through things like daily movement, going on a walk, talking to a loved one, fueling our bodies in a healthy way, but also fueling our mind, allowing for times of creativity and painting or drawing or adult coloring books, whatever it is, right? But that is actually something research shows. There's a wonderful book called Burnout, The Key to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by doctors Nagoski. It's two sisters who wrote the book. They talk about how the stress cycle actually has to be completed daily. And so when you go too long without completing it, right? Kind of like if you go too long without eating or you go too long without sleeping, your stress is actually compounded. And those emotions and those chemicals going on in your body and that impact on your heart and your lungs and how your body feels and your aches and even the quality of your sleep. Those are all tied into whether or not you're processing your stress regularly and having an outlet for it. And so you can tell if you're burned out. These are some signs of burnout is if you feel like you are doing more, like you keep meeting the moment, but you actually feel like nothing is worth it. You kind of actually start to disassociate with your work. And there's a depersonalization where you're almost seeing yourself going through the motions. Okay, I'm waking up in the morning. I'm going to my classroom to teach. I'm doing the thing and I'm smiling for the kids and I'm showing up for the parents. But I go home and I'm depleted and I don't feel like myself. And I don't feel like doing things I like. I don't want to go play pickleball. I don't want to color in the adult coloring book. I don't want to get together with my friends. I'm just so drained, right? And so I think if you're at that end of the burnout cycle, there is actually a clinical need. I think you go see your doctor, go get blood work done. It actually chemically impacts your body. And your doctor may recommend going to see a psychologist or whatever the case is. But that is like the very deep, dark, far end of like you've lost interest in participating in your own life actively in fun ways. That's when you can tell you're really, really burned out. But you might be on the road to there if, 3 or 4 days out of the week, you aren't really engaged outside of either your work or like your home life. I do want to add this because there's a lot of research that's expanded the definition of burnout lately. So we used to just focus on burnout in the work setting, and that's typically what it's referred to, where if you're going into an office or even working remotely, you can be burned out. However, there's a high level of burnout found among stay-at-home parents. I'll say parents because sometimes it's the mother, sometimes it's a father. So it's just when you're feeling like you're not completing your stress cycle. And when I say you're feeling, your body is feeling it, whether or not you're keeping track of it. When you're not completing that stress cycle regularly, you are on the road to burnout because our bodies need it just like we need water daily, just like we need food daily. We've got to complete that stress cycle daily or as close to daily as possible.
So, when we're trying to do all the things and get it all done, if we find ourselves feeling like, hey, I'm not actually engaged, I'm not enjoying life, but we're not sure what to change, where do we begin?
I love this question because I love sharing tips that I feel like are accessible to the average person, right? I don't want to make it seem like, okay, you're burned out. Now that you've identified it, how do you solve it? Do you have to go pay $1 million? Do you have to go see some kind of guru? No, the secret is right at your fingertips. I think one really effective thing is find someone you know and you trust and you love and share with them what you're feeling. I found if you have good, trustworthy, healthy relationships, that is the best place to start, whether it's your mom or your spouse or a friend, an old friend, even if they don't physically live next to where you are, because as mill spouses, we move all the time. But you say, hey, I am feeling really burned out. And here's what's happening at work. Like it's Q4, it's the end of the year. There's so many deadlines. I can't even think about Thanksgiving. I can't even think about Christmas. Share with them what's happening. And what you might get from an outside perspective is, you know what, Christine or Vimbo, whoever's talking to us, that sounds like you are burned out. And so let's see what's a 5 or 10 minute thing you can do every day to kind of resolve that. And also keeping in mind, this sounds like it's a season you're in right now, this part of the year, or maybe you're PCSing, like maybe your family is moving right now. It sounds like you're in a season of higher stress. So what can we do during this season to lighten your load in other areas? Finding someone to talk to about it, and that might be a licensed professional, but even just starting within your circle and saying, hey, do you think this is something I should, talk to someone? If you're in a healthy relationship, that's a great place to start. And also, like Simon Sinek has a great video that went viral a little bit ago where he talks about how just an 8-minute chat with someone, like whenever, is a great way to alleviate your stress. Like it's just research proven. You can do an 8-minute chat in carpool, in the pickup line at school. That's what I mean by like accessible. But additionally, I do think there are different things for different people. I can tell you what's worked for me. I love walking. I love it because I feel like it's something I can access. Most spaces we've lived on or that exist have a gym, if you're scared about walking outside by yourself. I've got a walking pad I've invested in my home office now just because I never want weather to be an excuse. But we know research shows 20 minutes a day of just walking helps your body lower those cortisol levels, lower those stress levels. And then when those are lower, you can actually think more clearly about your problems. Because sometimes our problems is our problem with the problem, if that makes any sense. Like we have stress about our stress. And so then once you've gone on a walk, another really useful tool for me, and this is different for everyone, is I love writing. So journaling is great. I do mind jumps like at least weekly, where I just write down everything in my mind. Okay, I've got to like make our guest list for Friendsgiving. And that's like, not even tomorrow. That's not close at all. But like I'm thinking ahead to things. Okay, I've got to think about my friend's baby shower and get her a gift. Just mind dumping things because our brains have such a high mental load that if you're in a busy season, carrying that around with you is actually having a bigger impact. So those are some starting steps. Talk to someone, move if you can in whatever way that looks like for you. Get some movement out of your body to just let the energy go. And then try to write it down. Or if you hate writing, make a voice note to yourself. Like just, do voice to text on your phone, whatever it looks like for you, just get it out of your head and on paper so you can see it.
So these are all really helpful tips. Now, do you find when you are in a state of moving towards burnout that there are different ways that you take care of yourself than you do when you are in a healthier, more balanced state?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm going to share a little quote from one of my favorite podcasters and authors. Her name's Kendra Dachi. She has the podcast and a book called The Lazy Genius. And she emphasizes that she has like different lazy genius principles, but she talks a lot about being a genius about the things that matter and lazy about the things that don't. And that matters differently in different seasons. And so she has a lot of principles. It's a great book. I would highly recommend it to anyone who is struggling with burnout. If you can't even sit down and read, listen to it on audio. But she talks so much about how, like, yeah, if I'm perfectly healthy right now, I'm in the middle of trying to challenge myself to wake up a little bit earlier, even though I control my own schedule. I used to be a 5 a.m. person when I was a school principal, and now I'm more like a 6 or 7 a.m. person. But because I'm in a healthy state, I'm not burned out. I'm like, you know what? I think I can push myself to try to wake up at 5 a.m. just so I can meet more of my health and fitness goals and start my day with exercise versus trying to chase it later in the day or schedule it, right? But that's something I'm prioritizing right now because I have the time and the bandwidth. If I was in a more burned out state, I think my baseline would be just trying to find movement where I could versus like starting my day with it and prioritizing it and really moving things around more. But I just think you have to start with what's most important right now in that season. If you're burned out, the most important thing is getting you out of burnout. And so that might include quitting some things that you've committed to just so you can get back on track and put things in their place and start with what's most important, your health, your relationships, your family, starting with those, and then everything else can come later.
Yeah, I think it's really hard when we're in that season because there's so much going on. And it's usually because of external circumstances like, hey, this deadline's coming up, or hey, we are in the process of moving and I can't control so many other factors. So when you're in that season and trying to find what are the things that I can commit to in this season to take care of myself. But let's say that season comes to an end. What do you do to move back to this place where you're not feeling the burnout?
Okay, so I love this. And I think I think this way because I think kind of on a school year basis, just because I worked in school so often, whether it's like the fall when the school year restarts or the new year in January, I think we kind of have to let ourselves reset our lives regularly, whether it's every 6 months or annually. And what I mean by that is, I think it's really good to examine everything you've committed to and take time away from things as much as possible. I think so many of us have such good intentions and we care about this cause on our base and we want to volunteer with this and oh, we want to be our kid's soccer coach, right? And it's all of these different things, but you can't be all of those things. And so I think for me, a lot of the times I have become a lot slower with my yes, and I've become a lot quicker with my no. And if I'm in a season where I start to feel like anything is drowning, I actually have this is a lazy genius principle from Kendra Adachi. She says, kind of decide once, right? So for me, I'm in a season with my business where if it is like military spouse related, if it's not going to take away from time with my actual spouse, right? Because I want to prioritize that, or time where I'm planning to exercise and work out and things like that. I have a few things that are non negotiable throughout my day. But if it's not taking away from those core pillars and someone invites me to go to a networking event, it's an automatic yes for me because I love connecting. I love building more relationships. But there are other things where people are asking me to volunteer my time or, even come and speak for a paid engagement, but it may not quite align. And so what I've done is I started telling people, you know what? Can I have a few days to think about this opportunity and whether or not I have the time and the capacity to give the right amount of energy to it? And what that does is when you get back to well, first of all, if a person pushes back on that, that's a red flag. No, like I would absolutely recommend not going into a situation where someone is already not respecting your boundary of just needing time to process that. But hopefully they do. And I've never had someone push back against that. When you come back 3 days later, sometimes I've said no to things that I'm just like, you know what? I'm so honored you've thought of me as a speaker for this. I actually have someone who is a better fit for who your organization is trying to speak to at this time. So let me introduce you to them, but I don't think this is a good fit for me. That's one option if it's like within a business. But if you're just even thinking personally, in my church, there have been opportunities to volunteer and lead in different things like that. And I just decided to do it on my terms. They want me to do something monthly. And I say, you know what? My capacity right now is I think I can do it quarterly. And that's what I'm going to sign up for the weekends that my husband and I know we can be at church. We know we can volunteer. I know I'll have time to prepare, right? Christine, I could absolutely do something weekly. I have done that. When I was a school principal, I was involved in my church on a weekly basis, but that's what led to burnout. And so now in this season, I'm very slow to my yeses. That there are very few things that I have automatic yeses for. And those mainly involve just my family, my immediate family, my extended family. And most of the things I prioritize as give me time and space to see if I have the capacity to be on call that often.
I mean, I think this is something that so many of us face, especially as military spouses, because there is always a volunteer opportunity. There is always things that need to be done and they need someone to do it. And trying to look at all of those opportunities and say, what is the right opportunity for me in this season? What capacity do I have? And can I say yes to this opportunity right now? And it's hard when you have opportunities that you're really excited about, but it's not the right time or the right season or the right fit. And learning to say no. One thing that has helped me is hearing somebody say, when you are saying yes to something, you're always saying no to something else. So
Yes.
I have to take that moment to think, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And so many times, if I don't take that time, the thing that I'm saying no to is to my spouse and to my kids and to things that I really am passionate about. So taking that time is not always easy, but it does make a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I think you just put it so beautifully. When we say yes to things, we are by nature saying no. Like if you're blocking out that 1 hour of time or 2 hours of time a week or whatever it is, you're saying no to other things. I think another thing I haven't mentioned yet is the beauty of just having blank space of time and allowing yourself to not always be going from one thing to another. I think that's something we've talked a lot about, how you can tell you're in a season of burnout, all of those signs, but you can tell you're in a healthier season if you wake up on a Saturday morning and you have nothing scheduled. That's actually a really good sign of health as far as like your stress level. Because if you're constantly going, you're booked from Monday through Friday, and then all of Saturday you're booked and all of Sunday, where is the margin for you to even just recover mentally and just not have to be emotionally pouring out or mentally pouring out? So, yeah, that's beautiful.
I think it's so important because so many times we have this idea of self care as something that we need a lot of time or that demands a lot of our money or something. But really carving out these that spaces of quiet, time for
Yes.
our mind and our body to process and absorb everything that's going on and what's happened and how life giving that space of silence can be. And that's not something that has to cost a lot of money. I mean, it could be just going for a walk in the neighborhood or going to a park nearby. But these little things can make a huge difference in our lives. So what are the some of the ways that you found self-care that don't cost a lot?
Oh, I love it. I love, love, love it. Okay. And this is different for everyone, right? So I will start by saying I'm an extreme extrovert. I love people. They are what give me energy. Although I will say, even if you're an introvert, find your people that you can pour, that can pour into you. But my form of self care is being social with people. So, for example, this past weekend, we went to a corn maze with some friends and it was very silly. And there were like these little girls who were telling us, they kept running towards us. I think they were probably like middle school age and telling us things were dead ends and they weren't. So they were getting us lost in this corn maze. We were stuck in for about an hour, but just playing as an adult is fun to me. I have a guitar. I laugh, I jokingly say I've been learning how to play guitar since I was 15 and I worked at summer camp. So I still know the same like four notes, like a G, a C, an E, an A. Depending on the day, I can play a few songs, but just allowing myself creative time. I love to color. I got into calligraphy a little bit. So sometimes I'll put on a little YouTube video and just practice hand lettering or things like that. And people do that. People have whole Etsy shops around it. I've decided I don't need to monetize every hobby. So that kind of thing. I ask my neighbors to go on walks. When the weather is nice, we go on walks together because then I'm getting social movement, fresh air, sunshine. You're just hitting a lot of boxes. Yeah, things that don't cost a ton of money. I love to bake. I already typically have the ingredients and I'm like, okay, if we keep the apples any longer, they're going to go bad. So we made some apple crumble the other day because we needed to use up some apples. If someone's listening to this and saying, man, I don't even know what my hobbies are, I'm so burned out, I would implore you to think about the last time you had fun and perhaps a hobby or an interest you had maybe when you were in high school or college or years ago, and consider trying to pick that up and see, pickleball, tennis, sports for a lot of people is a good form of self care. And then there's the cliche, like take a bubble bath. Honestly, sometimes that works. Like sometimes just hot water is like, oh, this is a good soak, or going to a sauna, right? So those kinds of things that's how I care for myself.
I think it's just so important to find those opportunities to take those moments for yourself. I was listening the other day to a book and talking about the importance of play as an adult and how necessary it is for us to get us out of the cycle of anxiety and into a cycle of creativity, of just things that are life giving to us. So I love that you brought play into that. As we wrap up today, is there something that you wish that military spouses would take away so that they know that you don't have to be in this place of burnout? What's possible for you?
Yeah, I would absolutely say, I think the number one tip I would have for military spouses, and I'm a newer one, so I'm just learning, would be don't be afraid of building relationships with people around you. Just because of the fact that we move so often, I think there can sometimes be, we can be hesitant to invest that time because we say, like, oh man, I'm already so burned out. I don't have time for friends. I've heard people say this, no new friends, right? But there's so much benefit to having healthy relationships, having people in your corner who can help you lift the load, regardless of where you're living, where you're stationed. So my advice to any male spouse out there who is struggling is, in my experience, anytime I've said to someone, hey, I'm struggling with this, or we just moved here, or I have no community yet, I've always found someone says, me too. I mean, that's literally how I ended up meeting a ton of my neighbors who live in my neighborhood. And now we have a women's Bible study on Monday nights in my neighborhood, just a couple times a year because I don't burn out. I don't do it like every single week all year. We did it in the spring. We're in the middle of one right now, a study. We just do it for a couple months at a time. But it's always because I say, hey, I would love to have people to do this with, or it could be a book club, right? It doesn't have to be spiritual, but find your people, even if you're somewhere for 6 months or a year. I have never regretted making friends with someone, no matter how long I knew them for. There's a woman I met when we moved here. She moved away like a month after we moved here. She's still fantastic. We still keep in touch from afar. And because we were just talking about different ways to, take care of ourselves, you will sometimes learn from other people what their version of self-care is and get new ideas for ways that you can care for your body and your mind and all of the things. So make friends. I'm just a friend evangelist. I love it. Make
It
friends.
I love it. It's so important. And I think we all need that reminder sometime as someone who is moving every year. And it's like, okay, do I want to put the time and the energy into building relationships when I know we're just going to move in a couple of months? It's that reminder to say, yes, it matters. It helps with so many aspects of our life. If are the one that will just reach out and say, hey, do you want to be friends? Do you want to go get coffee? Do you want to go for a walk? It can be small, but those connections can help us regardless if we are neighbors with them for a month or 10 years. Thank you, Vimbo, for coming on today, for sharing all of your expertise with us. Would you let everybody know how they can connect with you?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me. This was so fun. Like my cup is full. But you can find me online. I am the only Vimbo I know, but I will share my different places to find me. My website's vimbowatson.com to learn more about my speaking or what I offer. Or I also have a blog on there about education because I still love yapping about that. I also am on Instagram, Facebook at Vimbo Watson. So that's Vimbo Watson. I've never had to spell out my last name since I got married, but Watson. And I'm on, Instagram, Facebook, Threads. I also am on Substack. So yes, all the places. But yeah, just follow me and it's always a fun time in my corner of the internet.